Welcome, my fellow collectors, my caretakers, my stewards of history, as we call them on this show. This is another episode of Untold Civil War Curiosities, which is a very popular playlist that I have going. Many of you have expressed how you enjoy these episodes. Please keep liking, keep sharing, keep subscribing, keep this message alive. We want to keep sharing these untold Civil War stories, and of course share these untold Civil War curiosities and get eyes on some really amazing Civil War relics, artifacts, militaria. You know me, I love my Civil War photography, and today we have a real treat because we're looking at faces of the Confederacy. It's not this often that you get to see all these Confederate images in one place. The reason being is because of the Yankee blockade instituted by Abraham Lincoln. Photographers in the South may have not been able to get equipment and or supplies to produce as many photographs, and as well as the Confederacy was constantly outnumbered, so there were just less soldiers as compared to the Union ones. Plenty of Union images out there, more scarce to find Confederate images out there. But here we are, we have some great images before us today to share with you. But before we get into that, I want to talk about an image I shared with you in the last episode of a member of the Brownwater Navy, the Yankee Brownwater Navy, the Union Brownwater Navy. It was a great image. It was a post-war image. It showed this individual wearing his GAR medal and a second medal that I had assumed was either a state medal or a sort of unique reunion type medal, and I was wrong. I actually sold this image to Master Sergeant William Jones, who I'm so glad he got the image because this is sort of his bread and butter, and he identified the medal, that second medal on the veteran's chest, as the Danish-Prussian 1864 War Medal. So that's really neat to look at because here we have an image not only of someone who was in the Brownwater Navy, but was a Danish immigrant, who served not only in the Civil War, but then would go on and serve in the Danish-Prussian War. That's very unique. So there you have it. A lot of dealers out here who are selling these wonderful images, they don't have the time to research all of these images, but if you know your medals, know your uniforms, know your history, do your own research, you may be able to find a sweet deal when you find these things. So, if that is any message to you, keep reading. And to talk about doing research, I always like to talk about what books that someone might want to purchase for their library to use as sort of a reference guide to get eyes on Civil War images so that they can better prepare themselves when going out there in the wild and purchasing stuff to add to their collection. This didn't come out too long ago. This book, America's Defining Moment, produced by Military Images Magazine, is just a absolutely amazing book that shares a collection of some really, just stunning images of the Civil War. If we can get that to focus there, here's just a couple examples, right? Ugly as the devil, as we call those Puritan and ham hats. But these images are just amazing, and when you get to look at images like this, it really better prepares you when you're out there at a Civil War show, or even while you're online, on eBay, for example, or on a dealer website, to know what to look for. What do Civil War uniforms look like? What does age look like? Proper aging, so that you're not purchasing or accidentally purchasing a reproduction image, or you're not purchasing a post-war image, because the uniforms, believe it or not, they may look similar to the novice eye, but Civil War uniforms are different from post-war uniforms, Indian War uniforms. So this is something you want to do. You want to get books like this to help improve your knowledge on the topic. But let's get into what we're all here for. We're here for the Untold Civil War Curiosities. we're going to start off with these two images here. That's a beautiful image of a Confederate officer, probably from South Carolina. And it's beautiful because look at the tinting, the coloring on his sash and on his buttons, and even on the embroidery on his sleeves and on his forge kepi that he's holding to his side. I mean, this goes back to that last episode where we talked about, the Civil War in color. This is how they colored images. What a great image of a Confederate officer. And you might wonder, oh, why are we saying that this is a Confederate from South Carolina? It's not necessarily ID'd on the back. We have only a little bit of information on the back here. But if you look at the background, as we've talked about, when you do your research, this background is from George Cook, famous photographer from South Carolina, Charleston. Just look at the clarity of that. Now you can see that the image has been cut. That's not uncommon. When people were putting these images in their albums, they were somewhat encouraged to cut the image to make it fit. Now, of course, that's horrific to our minds today, but that's what it was sort of encouraged back then. And just look at the clarity of that. Now, how do we know this is George Cook? What do we know about George Cook? Well, that's when we open up a book like this, Silent Witness by Ron Field. There you go. This is another tome that should be in your collection when referencing, in order to use as a reference guide. And there you have it, guys. When I saw that backdrop, I knew I'd seen it before, went to the books, and there it is. Cook's Gallery. I'm able to compare that backdrop and make that decision. Now, Cook was known in Charleston as the leading daguerreotypist. Cook's portrait gallery advertised good pictures, either in daguerreotype, ambrotype, or colored photographs. His expanding business opened galleries in Chicago and Philadelphia, and actually began to sell not just images that were taken, but photographic materials to other photographers. That's how big it got. His real claim to fame, though, was that being in Charleston, he was one of the Charleston photographers to take probably the first images of the war. Once Sumter was bombarded, it was Cook, George S. Cook himself, who would visit the beleaguered Fort Sumter and take pictures of the fort after the siege. And this famous image here of Anderson, Major Anderson and his officers, was taken by George Cook and even published in Harper's Weekly. So George Cook is famous for being one of the first photographers to actually take images to capture the first moments, the opening shots of the Civil War. Here you have two Confederate officers going up on the website for purchase that were probably taken very early in the war by George Cook himself. But of course, when we think of the Confederacy, we don't just think of South Carolina and Charleston. We also think of Richmond, Virginia being the capital. And here we have another officer, Confederate officer. You can look and see that he has a plumed sort of slouch hat pinned up on the side there on the chair. And the back mark on this one is of Richmond, VA. So here's another image standing in his Napoleonic stance. That was sort of a flavor of the day. I mean, as much as today people might put up two fingers like the peace sign or V for victory or something like that, the Napoleonic stance was something that was extremely popular. To tuck your hand into your coat like that, that was something you would see all the time. Soldiers, I guess they want to mimic the proper posture of a soldier, and what doesn't say a true soldier or give off a true soldier vibe than, of course, Napoleon himself, right? I don't know if any of you have gone to see the movie Napoleon yet. I'm still waiting to go to see it, but I'm kind of excited. I mean, I love the line, "I found the crown of France in the gutter, and I picked it up with my sword, and I placed it on my head." I mean, who doesn't get excited about stuff like that, right? I know certainly our Confederate officer here was probably excited about stuff like that. Great image of a Confederate officer in full uniform, Napoleonic stance, plumed hat. What's not to like? Richmond, Virginia. Last but not least, we have a post-war image of a Confederate officer. Now he's very, very interesting because he's in fact identified on the back of this image. You can't see that. He's actually identified on the back there in what appears to me as sort of a period inscription as Reverend J W Evans, born in Ontario, Canada. Okay? And right there is a little inscription, "Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord." Now, Evans, as you can see here, very beautiful, clear image, wearing his post-war uniform. He's even got a badge on there, if you can see that, a sort of Confederate veteran badge. And what's interesting about him is I believe he started out as an artillery officer and then would eventually become a chaplain in the Confederate Army in an Arkansas regiment. So what's fascinating about this is here's the opportunity, although a post-war image, here's the opportunity to own an image of not only a former Confederate soldier, but a former Confederate soldier born in Canada, so a Canadian Confederate, and not only that, but a chaplain. So if you look up Reverend Evans from Arkansas, you'll see that there are plenty of resources that do pop up that help us confirm this identification. And what a great addition to your collection of Confederate images, your collection of Arkansas images, your collection in regards to religious themes, chaplains of the Civil War. This is something you've got to have in your collection. Great condition, great clarity, great content. So there you have it. These are the faces of the Confederacy, and we're going to be getting more Untold Civil War Curiosities coming your way. So stay tuned for another video. Like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you on the next one.